So that's why retrofitting is also key, so that we cut down on how much energy consumption infrastructures need by making them more energy intelligent, energy effective, and then also switching to a mosaic or a hybrid of more regional energy production so that it's more energy effective, because this thing of sending energy over a long distance is what the centralized grid is doing. It's so wasteful. And fragmenting many ecosystems, because we're building high-tension electric lines to go all over the countryside that are going through some of our nicest, pristine national forests and wilderness areas. And the National Institute of Health estimates that people who live in proximity within a quarter mile of a high-tension electric line are more prone to getting leukemia and immunodeficiency-related diseases. So there's an EMF field that spirals off of a high-tension electric line because it's losing 50% of its juice in transmission. That means there's a ton of electricity just coming off of this line all the time, which you can hear if you stand underneath a high-tension electric line on a really humid day, right? You hear that. You can tell, like, whoa, that's a little weird. That's up there just making this sound. So it's creating all these problems. It's creating health problems for people who live adjacent to it. It's wasteful, and we're dumping lead and mercury all over the countryside. So we're wasting juice, making people sick, and contaminating the countryside because we have a centralized energy grid. And so that's why I'm saying one of the things for us to think about as a push at a citizen level is retrofitting the energy infrastructure. That's definitely a first order of business to start to improve quality of life, air quality, and effectiveness of the activity of wanting to generate electricity. By mosaic, what I mean is, again, it's just the idea of not putting all of our eggs in one basket, but it's also the idea of what makes sense in a particular region. That's another thing that we've kind of lost in design language oftentimes, is we have a generalized vocabulary and we don't talk much about or emphasize that, in fact, everything is very regionally and site-specific. The idea also that we're going to be looking at is not necessarily like every building or every resident is going to have its own energy grid, but to have sort of maintenance plans that are like block-sized in urban areas. So you would have a facility that has several different types of juice that's a hybrid system that comes into it. And you'll see this on a number of communities and homesteads where people are trying to figure out how to get a good steady supply of electricity throughout the entire season. This is a hybrid system where they'll have a windmill, a micro-hydro system, and solar panels. And what we're looking at in terms of transition, I think, is we want to be creative. It's no one of these, Biodiesel, I'm sure a lot of you have heard the problems with biofuels, which is that, first of all, we don't produce anywhere close to enough vegetable oil to create the amount of diesel fuel that our present trucking industry consumes. But it's a useful transition technology, but it's not a replacement. And it's also another one that points to this same misconception, which is if we just try to keep a poorly designed system going with a less bad fuel, that's probably not the best way to think about how to troubleshoot what's happening. So does biodiesel become an excuse for us continuing to do long distance trucking as our way for getting materials around? Because that's one of the other major infrastructure retrofits we need that, the libertarians have been pushing for a long time in this country. We need trains to be brought back in. And that's something, we don't want to lose a beat on these. These are important things to push for. We need trains. We need local ways for people to bicycle. We need to have pedestrian foot traffic only areas in cities where there's lots of market activity already. This idea of just thinking that cars and trucks are inevitable and we're going to adapt the fuels that we stick into them to be more ecological is not a good direction to move. We need to continue to remember that cars fragment communities, trucks create lots of other impacts and pollution and are energetically highly inefficient in comparison to trains. We already have a massive amount of railroad beds constructed in this country that would be easy to recuperate.
A lot of which was undone, yeah.
Right, well, yeah, but still a lot of what was done is there, which is all the materials that were brought in to make a raised bed, which is significant when you see how many of these, go through floodplains and are like raised up like 20 feet and have that whole bed, so then you would go back in and lay new rails in them.